Out of all of the things that we have been writing about, I've found it a bit difficult to choose anyone in particular to share more publicly. And there are a variety of reasons for this, right? But part of our Saturn return, like one of the things that we have had to work with during that time, other than our Chiron and Leo, which we touched on a bit before, also had a lot to do with, I guess, just like putting ourselves out there more, being more transparent publicly, I guess, which seems a bit weird without like explaining the entirety of all of it. But what I wanted to talk about was privacy versus secrecy, and like how this plays a role in not only like who we are and what we've been doing, but as well as like why we do certain things or the way that we do them, or, and moving forward, kind of sharing why some things are the way they are, right? So, and again, we've like written about a lot over time, and this is another one of those things. But I think one of the things I run into with sharing writing in particular, and I guess any kind of thing that you share creatively, is always going to have its own effect, on varying people to varying degrees. But we're just very much aware of the power that words hold, right? And when we're speaking on our experiences and when they involve other people, right? Like the intention behind why we're sharing things or the overall like message of it is really what I think is most important. But at the same time, when we're talking about other people being involved, obviously that kind of like branches off into having effect in other places, right? Whether we intentionally mean for that to happen or not, it just is a part of the way things work, right? And so, right, it's good to be like mindful and intentional about the things we share, why, when, how, all that. But at the same time, not necessarily hold ourselves back from sharing what needs to be said just because it does involve other people. And part of my personal view on that too is, in, deciding like who we are going to be in life and whoever that character is, right? My hope, I guess, is that, we would be more mindful and conscious and intentional with our actions more than not. But when things happen in the world and it comes to interpersonal dynamics and people don't treat other people well, for example, right? I don't necessarily feel like any one person has any sort of obligation or duty to protect that person or those people from the consequences of their actions. And if that means speaking on something that has occurred, speaking the truth of a certain situation without, right? And this is important here, right? Like without necessarily trying to harm another person, without trying to hurt them intentionally or like bring harm towards their way. Like that's never what we want, ideally, right? However, like it is important to speak the truth of occurrences in the world, right? For a multitude of reasons. And one of the things that I did share publicly a little bit ago, even though, we're still a very small space here, it did involve openly sharing like some personal things about myself and my life. And, there's a lot more than just that we want to talk about. And I think for people that have known me personally over the years, whether that's from my childhood or who I've gotten to know, as an adult, or who I'm even getting to know at this current point in time, there, has been some changing or like transformation of those relationships as well as we're doing something like this, because it's just a bit different from before. And I think too, right, like as someone who spent many years offline, off social media, apart from being connected to like friends, family, acquaintances online, I didn't really use social media for anything more than that. I didn't feel like it would be time to do something like that. There was a lot that I was still learning and going through, and I was really focused on my own journey, my own well-being and healing and health, and the just, like building my relationships privately. And I think that's really important for everyone to do to varying degrees. But one of the things, or one of the many things that we've come to witness and learn about during our Saturn return and then after, right, is just how much people don't have that experience for a variety of reasons, right? Some people, it's like consciously chosen from a young age where they, engage with the public and having an online presence, and they might, understand to some degree what is being exchanged for that as far as like their privacy and things like that go. But I would say more often than not, most people do not fully understand or grasp or have that conscious realization of what it will cost them in the long run to be online or in the public eye when they're younger, right? Or even as like an adult newly to it, without having experienced certain things in our life and in our childhood, especially like while our brain is still developing up into the age of 25. And so many of our relationships are changing and our identity is evolving. And so a lot of people get kind of robbed of certain experiences that would probably better serve them if they were kept private. And this is, for me, one thing that I'm very thankful of, that I've been able to experience and work on developing myself and my own inner world, so that, if we felt like the time did come, as it is perhaps now, because hello, we're here, then we can share things more publicly from a place that is more rooted and grounded and somewhat stable, I guess you could say, within ourselves, where we're not as like neurotic as we once were. Because there were a few times in the past when we presented ourselves online or like in a more public space, but we were just completely all over the place. And that could be due to a variety of things. But it's funny looking back on, any little bits of evidence that I have of myself online in the past, I just laugh at. I also laugh at myself now for, the things that we're putting up, but it's a part of life. Like regardless, however, whoever, whenever we participate in things like this, it is what it is. It's not something I think that any of us should necessarily feel shame for, but to be able to look at it and laugh and say like, okay, yes, this is a part of myself, or, part of the community, our own human evolution. It's fine. It's fine. And obviously, if we make any mistakes along the way, like taking accountability, learning, growing from it, whatever, right? But everything will be fine in the end. So with all that being said, though, we're already almost 10 minutes in. Oh my God. Your girl can yap. But this is not, I was saying all this leading up to talking about privacy versus secrecy, right? So, and I find too with writing, right, because we can't always tell like what a person's intention is in writing something, right, or sharing something, even if that is from their heart. Like we don't necessarily know that. And so being able to see a person, right, and like view their body language and their tone, their inflection, and even just straight up like hearing them explain or share certain things can help us to understand, yes, but also like no one can do that 100% all the time, and we shouldn't for a variety of reasons, right? So some things just need to be, and we need to just let them be as they are and exist without having to necessarily explain it or explain ourselves, because as we know, there are plenty of people in the world, especially when we feel confused by anything or uncertain, right? There can be a grasping for that certainty of like trying to understand. I get this, right? I do this all the time. I'm constantly playing things through my head and like reworking them, trying to understand. Like I have a fairly methodical mind, and that could be due to, some of our own personal placements. I'm also a Virgo moon, and so we have a kind of more analytical, logical way of processing our own emotions and in turn our internal world. But yeah, so we always got the gears turning and rolling in there, and we're always processing things. And it's something that I've had to work on, is like taking a step back and like trying to silence our mind, quiet it, like do something else, take more breaks, rest, relax. Even just this afternoon, I had an extra day off this weekend, which was very timely, very much needed. And I like needed rest out of nowhere. I was just like, I just need to like stop everything I'm doing. And we just lay down for a while with our eyes closed, fan on, just relax, which was really nice, right? But there were plenty of times in our life when we did not do things like that, and we would run ourselves into the ground, into burnout, because we had trouble just coping with daily life and learning how to slow down and like regulate ourselves. But we've been working very hard at that for some time. So yes, getting to a place of allowing rest is a win. I think it should be for anyone. So going back to talking about privacy versus secrecy, and also in sharing this, right, a part of, like I said earlier on, like why we are the way we are and do the things we do. And I've been iffy about like talking about this and like, again, what I share, how much, how, because anytime something involves another person or group of people and like how the things we say may affect them, I do take that into account, and I take it very seriously, and I always have. But at the same time, just because the things we say might affect another person or people, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't say it. And sometimes even it is more helpful or beneficial that we do. And that's also been a lesson for us to learn, right? As someone who has been fairly quiet in a lot of ways most of our lives and kept our mouth shut, there are a lot of things that we want to talk about and we want to share, and in hopes that it will resonate with or be able to help someone, if not many people at some point. So we'll see. But as far as this goes, I've always been a fairly private person, I would say. Since I was young, I didn't really have the privilege of having as much privacy as other people perhaps have had in their youth. Like as a kid growing up, we didn't have doors in our house except for the door outside. So, our rooms were just open. And even our bathroom, we didn't have a door. We had a bed sheet as like a curtain. And we had half the wall missing in there too. So like you could see like into the kitchen. So if someone was standing there washing dishes, they could look over their shoulder and see you sitting on the toilet. Okay. Just a little, get an idea kind of where we came from. And I also grew up showering outside year round at our house in Florida. And although we had a partial privacy fence, it didn't stop the neighbors' kids from peering over to us. So we did have a bit of that going on. And so I remember my grandmother had built another fence for more privacy, but it still wasn't like, we didn't have a whole lot of privacy. Yeah, and there are a lot of things, but we're not going to get too deep into that specifically. I'm just trying to get a bit of a background as to like, again, talk about this thing. So yeah, we didn't have a whole lot of privacy growing up. And then when I moved to, another state after that to go to a boarding school, there also wasn't a whole lot of privacy there, or it wasn't necessarily always respected, or there weren't really great boundaries within the household around that, or taught to us or upheld. And so it wasn't until I really, became a young adult and left school and was out on my own that I was able to afford, living in a place and having a lot more privacy, which was, very new and exciting for me at the time. But ever since then, I would say we have really held on to that and like very near and dear to our heart of just like, I spent so many years around people and not having space to myself, being able to even just like think and feel and be and exist that like other people aren't right around us all the time, right? So it's something that I very much value as an adult. And yeah, it's just something that I don't take for granted. I don't think any of us should, but when we don't experience something and then we do, we have a bit of a different outlook on it. So it's something that I really am grateful for now, and I try to protect as much as possible. And so in coming to a place like this, right, where we are sharing parts of ourselves online now, and I would say back in late 2023, oh God, I'm like, be careful what we say here, right? So back in late 2023, when I returned to social media, and originally it was like just my Facebook, and I started posting things on there again. And for me, it was kind of like warming up to the idea of like being seen by a lot of people, because I still wasn't very comfortable with it. But, to my surprise, there were a lot more people viewing us than I had expected, I guess, because my Facebook had, like, I said before, had only really been used for like close friends, family, like acquaintance members, people who I had known through work. Like, it wasn't anything too crazy, so I was like, oh, and I think I have like a friend list of like maybe like 60 people, it's nothing crazy. So when we started posting things on there and kind of like playing with it, like the stories where you can make stuff and they have stickers you can add, I really had a lot of fun with that, like playing around with it and just figuring out how things work and like making things and just kind of testing it out. What we were not really prepared for at the time was, there being people viewing us or the things that we were making that would be complete strangers to us, people who I had like never met. And I struggled with this because it's one thing for like just like passing casually, like people want to see like something that you're doing and then just they disappear, go away or whatever. But the thing I struggled with was when that didn't happen and there were complete strangers who were viewing the things that I was posting regularly, religiously even, and some it was like to the point where it was like every time I would post something, there would be a particular person or a particular couple or few people who would always see it like right away. And again, at first I was like, oh, it's probably nothing. It's no big deal, whatever. But, we were uncomfortable with some things because there was a lot going on during my life at this time. In the midst of our return, there was a lot we were focusing on and like focusing on our healing in particular. And so we were uncomfortable, for a variety of reasons. And then we decided to take a step back again, and we deactivated our account for I think like 5 months or something like that. And we were just like really zoned in on the other things we had going on in our life and like focusing on that. But we really did want to return because ultimately like my goal or my plan was to like come back to doing this and making things more consistently and sharing more. And ideally without that discomfort or some of the fear that had arisen from being viewed by complete strangers. So, but one of the first things we noticed when we did come back after that 5 months was like almost immediately the same thing happening, where it was like these strangers that I still didn't know who they were or why they were watching me or where they came from And still to this day, we don't know certain things. Like, we don't have all the answers. But yeah, we've contemplated a lot in regards to some of this stuff. And there are other things too at the time with like where I was living, of like certain strange things going on. And, you know, we have experienced some odd behavior from people we have known in the past. Like, how much do I say about this? So we've experienced all kinds of strange things. And I think when it comes to things like stalking, for example, we could say part of this could be due to like Plutonic influence. And I think learning about my own Pluto and our Pluto dominance, because we are, and I think, I don't know if, I think I touched on this in the last video briefly, but, you know, we have the most Pluto and Venus in our chart as far as transits go, and like the way different things work together energetically. And so it explains a lot for us personally, when it comes to our relationships, like not only ourselves and how we've related to ourselves, but also with other people, and perhaps why we've experienced some of the things that we have that perhaps have taken on a bit of a darker nature, even more sinister at times, where, yeah, we've experienced some things like stalking and just odd things happen. That's not really the point of what we're talking about here. We certainly don't want it to be, but it plays a big role in this, right? Because as much as we have really tried to protect ourselves over the years and our own privacy, that doesn't mean that there haven't been instances where there are people who have tried to do things to go against that, to not honor that with ourselves, right? And anytime I have experienced that or seen it happen, I try not to pay too much attention to it or put too much energy into it, because that also is a form of protection. And we've just tried to focus on like our own life and things. And ultimately, we understand our own protection, but it does bother us, you know, and as it would for any human being, I think. And we've always tried to be understanding of these things, but it still just doesn't sit quite right with us. So, okay, we're getting a little bit off task here, but if we reel it back in here, I think this plays in part with our lessons around boundaries too during our Saturn return. Because one of the things that I struggled with since my youth, right, is how do we maintain boundaries that we've set for ourselves when there are people who refuse to accept them or honor them. And this is something, again, that I've always struggled with, because I don't like to hurt people, right? And so it's always like been confusing and even rubbed me severely the wrong way when I tell someone no, you know, or I don't like something, or I don't want something, or just straight up like choose not to interact with a person, or go as far as blocking them even. And all of those things, whether it's one or multiple or all of them combined, all of those things like not being enough of a a signal, if not straight up telling someone to leave us the fuck alone. Right? And I think too, because when it comes to like strangers or people that we don't know super well, it's important to be careful too in the ways we interact with them, right? Because we do not know their level of like mental stability or wellness. And we have a lot of empathy for people in, a variety of situations, and mindsets or mind states, right? Like we can understand how, even on a lot of levels, that people get to a certain place where they would do things that would harm another person, but just because we can understand it doesn't necessarily make it okay. Yeah, and I think too, from my personal experience, having not been protected by the people around me. There have been many instances where I have. I'm very thankful for the people in my life over the years who have been a safe person and safe place for me, and who have done things to like stand up for me. I've always really appreciated that, and I still do, very much to this day, because while it's not a constant struggle or challenge, it is a consistent one. And again, like the one video I talked about, like boundaries amidst workplace violence, because that's like an ongoing theme. That's just one of them. And I didn't even go into talking about like the sexual harassment at work, but that plays a big role too in a lot of it. And that's just work. Like that's not even talking about like our personal life and trying to live and exist in the world. But yeah, so, we've had to fight throughout our life in a lot of ways for our privacy, to protect like our own health and well-being. And I feel like we've done a pretty good job of that. But still, there were challenges around that as far as like coming back online and presenting ourselves here in a public space, while still trying to protect that as much as possible. And again, because that line is blurred for so many people when they don't have an understanding of what that is for themselves, or what it is that they truly want for themselves, or how to have some of those things, then all the more so, right? They can't necessarily, or typically don't necessarily understand in interacting with a person who does. And it can create some tension and some problems. But in relation to this secrecy then, right? So I've never really considered myself a secretive person. Private, yes. Secretive, no. I do think that secrets are important to a certain degree, right? Like obviously when we talk about boundaries, like not everyone or just anyone should know anything and everything about us. Like there are levels and layers to this, right? So there are certain things about me and who I am that I wouldn't share with anybody, literally no one. There are some things that are meant for like just us, or like between us and, a higher power, or, whatever it is that we might believe in, faith-wise, spiritually speaking. So there's that, right? It's like the center of you and who you are as a human and as a soul, spirit, whatever you want to call those things. And then, beyond that is like the people closest to us, whether that be a partner or close friends, family, and then beyond that, like acquaintances and community and all that stuff. And so within those layers then, and those relationships of people, especially like the closer we get to certain people and there are things we share with each other, obviously there are things that would be considered secrets that would be healthy to hold safe for another person or a group of people, right? Especially particularly things that like aren't harming anyone, okay? And this is the key thing here, right? Like, as long as nobody's hurting another person, then yes, those are like safe, healthy, good secrets we want to hold on to and keep for other people. However, right, when we learn that a person or a group of people are doing things secretly that are harming another person or a group of people, that is where holding on to those secrets or keeping those secrets safe is not healthy. That would be considered not a good thing to do, right? Because then we are, it's like we have to look at what we are communicating, not only to ourselves, right, if we're holding on to something like that, but then also to the people around us. You know, if we are, even without saying the words, by our action of holding harmful secrets, right, what message that is sending to the people around us, like if they were to find out, for example, right? And this is a conversation I actually have at work fairly regularly when it comes to some of the harassment I've experienced and experience on an ongoing basis, where I have to, or I choose to remind certain people in this way, where when they make certain comments, especially like sexual comments, or they take too much of an interest in my personal life, for example, right? My private life, and asking questions that are just completely inappropriate and uncalled for, and I do not want to participate in, very simply, right? I have to remind them, and I try to do this in the politest way possible, that I do not care to have that conversation, and there are reasons why we should not be having that conversation, or why it is not okay, it's not acceptable, it's inappropriate, it's wrong, very point blank, right? And then even sometimes having to remind people of like who they are, you know, like, are you married and have a spouse? Why are you asking me this question? Do you have a son or daughter or child? And are they around my age? Why are you making comments like that? You know, things of that nature. So, yes, when we're talking about secrecy versus privacy, I think there's a fine line. And for all of the people that we've met in our lives and we come across, I think this is a really important thing, that it can tell you a lot about a person, how they act or interact in this realm and about these things, right? It can let you know whether a person is safe or not. And I think that as much as the people around us, I think for the most part, do truly mean well, and most people do not intend to harm other people, it is true that there are people in this world who have bad or poor intentions, and who do mean harm, and who will do things consciously and purposefully, intentionally, to cause harm to another person. And this is also, again, something that we really struggled with all throughout our life, accepting as true, even though we've lived it, you know. It's like, if we're not, I'm like, how do I want to say this? I've always struggled with this because I do believe in the power of choice and in free will. Regardless of what we have gone through in life and suffered and experienced, you know, the severity of it, we still always have choices. And, you know, so we can understand and empathize with people for the choices they've made, even if they've made poor ones, even if they've done things to harm people on purpose. And wait, let me just stop right here. Okay. I'm not talking like I'm completely innocent either, right? Like I have done some fucked up shit in my life. And there's one thing that comes to mind right away. Yeah, let me put myself on blast for a minute. Yeah, there was this one kid when I was in elementary school. Oh my God, I feel still to this day, right? It's like, and this is where it blows my mind that, we as a human species get stuck in these cycles of like suffering where we're just continuing to do the same shit over and over. And like the cycle of violence continues, right? Because how can you do something to hurt another person and not live with that for the rest of your fucking life and have that replay in your brain, right? So there is like forgiveness to be had, and like I've forgiven myself for the fucked up shit I've done in the past, and I've been able to move on and like live a life and like be happy and not, be depressed over like some stupid shit I've done in the past. But at the same time, the memory sits with me of like, oh yeah, I did do that before. Like, let's not ever do that again, right? And also, right, like I don't carry shame attached to it anymore, so that I can talk about it openly and like how I've learned from it, but also like I don't know if this kid would ever come across this, but I'm like, I'm so sorry. Yeah, but there was this one kid when I was in elementary school. It was a young boy, and I kicked him where it counts. I guess you could say. I mean, that's just like one example. But the worst part was it wasn't even just me. It was like me and my girlfriends. It was like me and a group of girls. We like ganged up on him and were kicking him when he was on the ground. I feel so bad about it now. And honestly, like, again, when I've like looked back on this in the past and processed through it, because of like the violence that I grew up in my home and how I saw like my grandmother just totally like disrespect her husband and, not have much love or appreciation for men. I saw how as a young girl that was rubbing off on me. And as much as like I didn't want to feel that or like become that, like I saw how it was happening when I was little, right? And so we've come a long way, right? Like, but yeah, we have done some fucked up shit. Yeah, and that's just one of them. I still remember his name too, to this day. We're not going to put that on blast here, right? And that's the other thing. When I think about all of the memories from my youth too, like back to the time when I was like 4, I think is when I have some of my earliest memories. I remember the names, the places, some of the streets, like very specific like activities. Like there's so much that we remember that if I were to say on here, ooh, bitch. Because I think too, and this isn't just for childhood, but like for people in general, right? Like specifically those who harm other people and then they realize after the fact, or even if they don't, right? If there's any ounce of like remorse or guilt felt or regret for the things that they've done, right? On that same token, they very much would not want anyone to know or find out, right? Like their ego gets in the way and they want to like protect their own reputation and, however their character is perceived by other people. And this is where the whole like scapegoat thing comes in, right? And we have been that. But we are not that any longer. So, and that was a big lesson for us during our Saturn return, was to break that cycle, so that never happens again. As far as we are able to stand for ourselves and protect ourselves, and also in doing so in a more public way, because a part of what like helped fuel us coming forward in this way is experiencing, those things repeatedly of like, I'm just a normal girl, going to work and having friends and living my life, like there's nothing too crazy that we do. It's like we live. And yet, because we didn't have much of a presence online, a lot of the things we experienced were just going on behind the scenes, and it's like no one would necessarily be any the wiser of what we had experienced or gone through, because we lived life offline, which is it's kind of how it's meant to be, as far as like, we shouldn't be putting our whole life online. We need boundaries around that. But at the same time, like, there are people who will take advantage of things like that and who will purposefully target certain people, right? Single white woman, like so many different things, right? And then some people are so arrogant that they would even think that because of the way a person appears or presents themselves or lives their life, that they think that they can get away with something because of that, even without knowing a person, knowing anything really about them. And I think, for ourselves, that has also been a form of protection, of like appearing one way, right? And it's not that we're not, but right, there's always a lot more going on inside a person and behind the scenes that we just simply don't know about. And as far as my own life goes, my own past and history, and what we've learned and what we've healed from and through, and what we've integrated within ourselves, and how we have used all of that to then help the people around us that we love and that we care for on a day-to-day basis. This is a time for us to consider, in what ways can I do more of this? And one of those ways is by presenting ourselves online. And in doing so, at the same time, it adds another layer of protection to us in showing, right, that we are more than just one thing. Single white female. She looks vulnerable. She looks sweet and innocent and naive. She would never say a damn thing. No one would know. Bitch, fucking try me. But seriously, right? Like, I think just the audacity that some people have, the utter ignorance and arrogance that some people carry within themselves to think that they can harm another person, even if they never actually get to, that they even have the thought process, and they think that they can, or that they would attempt to, that they would even try. Yeah. And for me personally, right, other than just ourselves, because there are, people in my life that I consider very important, that I love and care for, and, things that we have been building in our lives together, communally, and as part of a forming legacy over time, there are things that I have to live for that I would not trade for the world, and that I would protect with my life. And while not everyone feels that way or has that in their life, it's something that I'm very grateful for, that I consciously participate in and contribute to, again, on like a daily basis. And it's something that I've been nurturing to grow. And again, like, I just don't play about it, right? Like, I don't play about my own protection, well-being, or that of those who are close to me and whom I love. And so, we've always been fairly open-hearted in the way that we feel like, there are plenty of people who can be a part of our fold, right? There are plenty of people who we come across, who we meet and interact with on a day-to-day basis. And for those who, we like and we get along with, and who wish to stick around, and who, want to invest and get to know more, like, we take people under our wing and they become like family, or friends, distant family, kin, whatever you want to call it, right? And I love that, because sorry, I keep getting like notifications coming up. What is this? It's moon hour of the day. Yes. And so since I was a kid, I've always had the dream of having like a big family, not necessarily biologically, like popping out 10 million children. No, but as far as like, creating and forming those kinds of bonds with the people around us, right? Where it's like big loving community, and like that being family has always been a dream of mine. And so I feel like, we can participate in that here. Yeah, we've done a lot of that behind the scenes over the years, and I feel like we've created a pretty firm foundation in that way. And so this is just another extension of that. This is such a fucking long video compared to the other ones we made, but I guess we had a lot to talk about. The vibes was right, I guess. I also need to go get my laundry out of the dryer now. So this is probably, we can keep going, but to wrap it all up, to sum it up, right, talking about privacy and secrecy, it's something that we notice and we pay attention to, and it's something that, we have our own view on personally in our life, and like this is how we kind of see it. But also in cultivating that for ourselves, right, we're able to see and recognize that in other people around us, and kind of gauging, like how safe they are and where they will stand, or like what place they get in our life, whether that is, coming anywhere near close to us or keeping them, on the outskirts. And for reasons like this, right, like there are people who act really shady, and it's usually not that hard to tell, when someone is like that, when they are more secretive than they are private. And there are some who do a good job of a blend of those energies, right? And who know how to have a bit of both, right? And again, like there are healthy ways to do that. But I think for a lot of people, it exhibits itself in unhealthy ways. And usually when that is, we can tell. You can see that. You can see it in someone's eyes. You can see it in their face, in their body language, in their behavior. And again, with like having a presence online or in the public eye, I don't want to be known for that. Personally, I would not want to be known as like a secretive person, other than like I hold the secrets of those I love and care for dearest to me, right? But not harmful ones, like personal things, like my dog died when I was 10, like those kinds of secrets, not like I fucking murked him, like not that kind of stuff. But that exists in the world. So yes, we've been wanting to talk about this, but that's all. Just something to think about. One of the things we think about, we were writing about, and we decided to make a video. Okay. Yeah, I guess that's it. So yeah, thanks. If you did watch this whole thing, dear God. I'm going to end this now. We'll be back with something else when we feel like it randomly. It's not so random, but okay. Yep, that's all. Thank you for listening to this and being here, and I love you. Bye-bye.